Now, the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett went on Sky News in what has to be, to me, the most astonishing interview I have ever seen.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on.
point.
I want to tell you. No, listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show. And I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped, please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame. We're trying to have a conversation about a very serious situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
That is words of a madman, a crazy lunatic. He was asked a question, a very reasonable question, that if you're going to cut water, electricity, and food, especially to hospitals, then children, babies on incubators will die. That is what's happening. That is what's going to happen. His response was, they're all my enemies. They're all Nazis. Now, I'm not twisting his words when I say that he thinks that all Palestinians are evil, are terrorists, are his enemy, including babies, because that's his response. His response wasn't, we should be targeting Hamas, it's not the fault of the Palestinians, they are innocent. No, his response, his first go-to was, they are all my enemies. He then said it's not their responsibility, Israel that is, to look after Palestinians. Yes, it is. If you are occupying, and yes, Gaza technically isn't an occupation, I believe it still is. I mean, the IDF troops were driven out in 2005 because of Palestinian resistance, but they're still surveyed, there's still killings going on, and they still control the resources Israel does. I mean, that's how they can threaten to pull the internet, water, electricity, because they control it. So it is their responsibility. Even though these are words of a madman, his view is shared by many in the Israeli establishment at the top. It seems to be shared by many in the British establishment and the American establishment, basically in the West and in our mainstream media. And it's lunacy. It is genocide. There doesn't seem to be a single prominent politician in this country that is calling this stuff out. This is words of terror. And it just shows that these people, that Bennett used to be the Prime Minister of Israel, I personally think, the ideology of the Israeli government. It's just to wipe Palestinians from the face of the earth. We have IDF militarists who are saying that we need to essentially wipe Gaza and it will never look the same again, because the plan is to kill everyone in the region and Israel can expand there. That's what it's all about. Some things are complicated and some things are very simple. This is very, very simple. You have the Israeli government who want to wipe Palestinians off the face of the earth and they want to build there. That is what they believe. We have Israel's President Isaac Herzog who echoed the same sentiment. Israel's President Isaac Herzog accused Palestinians in Gaza of being collectively responsible for the attack. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not being aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true, he said on Friday. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup. Powerless Palestinians could have risen up against a dictatorship. Remember, yes, Hamas was elected back in 2006. There hasn't been an election since. The idea that what their government does is a reflection of the Palestinian people, therefore they should be blamed, is disgusting. I don't think this person actually believes that, because he wouldn't say the same for many other countries. But it's an excuse, it's a propaganda tool to rally support behind Israel's genocide. You also have top Israeli officials trying to equate Hamas with ISIS, even though they hate each other, because what they're trying to do is make this conflict into good people versus bad people, terrorists versus innocents. But you can't look at this without looking at it through the lens of geopolitics. So if we look at the growth of ISIS, yes, ISIS are a terrorist organization, ultra-conservative. They wanted to kill and behead gay people. They hated Western values. They wanted death to the West, right? But the growth of ISIS happened because of geopolitics. One, because back in 2012, the West believed that ISIS were the so-called moderates in the region. We actually helped arm them. So that was our direct involvement leading to the growth of ISIS. But secondly, our bombing campaigns, where we're killing innocent civilians in the region, is a great recruitment tool for ISIS. That's how it happened. You cannot disconnect Western foreign policy and bombing campaigns with the growth of terrorism in these regions. This is very similar to Hamas. Now, I'm not denying Hamas aren't ideologically ultra-conservative. I think they are. They're religious fundamentalists. But again, you can't see what's happening in the region without geopolitics. So if Israel wasn't occupying Palestine, then the attacks from Hamas would never have happened. You're going to have Palestinians who are going to get behind Hamas because from their point of view, they're being killed, murdered in the streets, and no one is there to defend them apart from Hamas because it's the only means of defending themselves. And again, I reiterate, it's not an excuse, it's not acceptable, but you have to look at this in a political way, not just religious fundamentalists and liberal democracy. It's rarely just about ultra-religious fundamentalists versus good and peaceful people. There's almost always geopolitics in there. We are making the same mistake over and over again. If we look back in the 80s when it comes to the IRA, of course the IRA didn't represent all Irish people, but that was the narrative in the mainstream media. We essentially decided that all Irish people were terrorists. If you spoke up against the occupation from the British in Northern Ireland, you were siding with terrorists, which is clearly ridiculous. If you were to say, of course, the killings from the IRA were disgusting, it was atrocious, but also British occupation who were murdering people left, right and centre was also wrong. Again, you were treated as a terrorist sympathiser. It was those who were willing to look unpopular at the time, to say the so-called controversial statements, which is, we need peace in Northern Ireland. It was those that helped bring about peace. And then ironically, you did have people like Margaret Thatcher who are being wax lyrical about the oversimplification, calling anyone that wanted peace, anyone who were willing to talk to the IRA as terrorist sympathisers, but then she was doing it in secret anyway. And we don't learn the lessons. The exact same thing is happening now. Those of us who support humanity say Hamas killings are wrong and Israeli genocide is wrong doesn't mean we're sympathising with terrorists. We just want peace. And it's crazy that those in the 80s who were in Parliament then, some of them are still in Parliament today, are not recognising that something very similar is happening. You know, we look back in history and we look at so many atrocities that we have done. We look at the Holocaust, millions murdered under Stalin. We look at a plethora of things that we are disgusted by ourselves, and we ask ourselves the question, how did we allow this to happen? It seems alien to us when we read these stories in the history books. We say, how were we that immoral as a society, as a world back then, that we allowed these things to happen? And we can't wrap our brains around it. But it is simple. We allow these things to happen because we always do, and we're doing it today. Future us will look back today and say, how did we allow an occupation? How did we allow an apartheid state? How did we allow the genocide of Palestinians? And we will struggle to fathom how we stood by and watched. But it's so simple because we're living in it right now, and the majority of people, and I say majority of people, I'm talking about pundits in the mainstream media and our politicians, are cheering on the same things that when we look back in history, those same people in power back then were cheering it on as they're cheering it on today. And history is just repeating itself.